everyone, hope you're doing well. If you've been waiting for real updates on the $2,000 payment people keep calling a dividend, before we dive in, hit subscribe so you don't miss regular updates, and like and share this video so it reaches more people who truly need it. Now let's talk about what actually changed, because a quiet move tied to President Trump just rewired how this money could be distributed. Most people had no idea anything was even happening. There was no primetime speech, no flashy countdown graphics, no cable panels yelling over each other. Instead, there was a simple confirmation, a signature, and approval of a $2,000 tariff-based payment that didn't come from Congress, didn't rely on borrowing, and didn't run through the same IRS system Americans have been stuck with for decades. Here's the part that shouldn't be ignored. This wasn't just about sending out checks. If this were a typical stimulus, it would have happened in broad daylight, wrapped in political theater, and tied to a dozen compromises. But that's not what happened. This happened at 2 a.m., the hour used for execution, not debate. And almost immediately, seniors were moved to the front of the line. Not because of headlines or polling, but because the numbers finally told the truth. Inflation isn't easing where it hurts the most. Fixed-income Americans felt it first. Groceries, utilities, prescriptions, rent. Those costs never cooled. So tonight we're breaking down what that 2 a.m. move really means, why the money didn't flow through the IRS, why Social Security wasn't touched, and why this looks less like a one-time payment and more like a test of a different system altogether. Once you understand what actually changed at 2 a.m., it becomes clear this wasn't the end of something. It was step one. Let's start with the timing, because timing tells you everything. This didn't happen at noon. It didn't happen during market hours. It didn't happen with cameras rolling and politicians lining up for credit. It happened at 2 a.m. That's not random. When governments want headlines, they hold press conferences. When they want leverage, they leak information. But when they want finality, they act quietly after markets close, after media cycles reset, and when interference drops to zero. The Treasury confirmation didn't speculate. It didn't tease. It didn't ask for permission. It confirmed that the structure was approved and moved straight into execution. That distinction matters. Speculation happens in daylight. Execution happens in the dark. If this were symbolic or just a talking point, it would have been loud. Instead, it was surgical. No debate, no delay, no warning. That tells you something uncomfortable. This wasn't meant to persuade anyone. It was already done. And once you understand that, you realize the system didn't block this. It stepped aside. This is where most people get it wrong, and where the media keeps misleading by omission. This was not a stimulus check. Stimulus money comes from borrowing. It comes with congressional chaos and inflation baked in. This didn't. The $2,000 payment came from existing tariff revenue, money already collected, already sitting there, not printed, not borrowed, not tied to a spending bill. That changes everything. When the money already exists, Congress can't hold it hostage. Treasury already has authority. There's no vote, no omnibus package, no last-minute add-ons. That's why this model avoids the inflation backlash that crushed past relief efforts. Nothing new was injected into the system. Nothing added to the deficit. Nothing ran through the traditional IRS stimulus pipeline. For the first time in a long time, money reached Americans without passing through the same political machinery that always slows things down. That's why this felt different. Calling it stimulus hides how disruptive it actually is. This wasn't spending. It was redistribution of existing revenue, something Washington almost never does. This is where it stops being abstract and starts getting personal. Buried inside that 2 a.m. decision wasn't just approval for payments. It was a rewrite of priorities. Originally, the system assumed workers and middle-income households would feel tariff pressure first. The data destroyed that assumption. Almost overnight, seniors moved from the background to the front of the line. That doesn't happen unless someone admits something out loud. Fixed-income Americans were being crushed. Workers can adjust. They can change jobs, negotiate pay, add hours. Seniors can't. When rent rises, groceries spike, prescriptions jump. There's no offset. The check is the check. That's why the priority flipped quietly. without press releases or speeches. Seniors weren't elevated for politics. They were elevated because the numbers forced it. This wasn't charity. It was overdue recognition of who was bleeding first. Here's a story that puts this into perspective. A viewer shared that her treatment was covered, but the follow-up visit wasn't, and she didn't know until the bill arrived. She did everything right, followed the plan, assumed she was protected, and still got blindsided after the crisis. That's the danger of systems that look complete, but quietly leave gaps. Now let's address a claim that shouldn't survive reality anymore. You've heard the headlines saying inflation is cooling and prices are stabilizing. That doesn't match what seniors are paying. Food didn't cool, utilities didn't cool, rent didn't cool, prescriptions didn't cool. CPI averages pain across people living very different lives. Internal data finally showed what seniors already knew. Inflation hits hardest where income can't move. A retiree living on $1,100 or $1,300 a month doesn't experience cooling. They experience compression. Every increase squeezes something else out. That data forced the rewrite. If inflation were actually easing where it mattered, there would have been no reason to reshuffle priorities at 2 a.m. Another reason this confused so many people is because the biggest change was never explained on TV. Treasury didn't just approve payments, it rebuilt distribution. A quiet, three-tier system replaced old assumptions. Tier 1 became the fast lane. Tier 2 slowed. Tier 3 became review-heavy. Low-income seniors, including those on Social Security, SSI, or SSDI, were placed directly into Tier 1, not because they earn more, but because their income is less flexible. The system stopped asking who earns and started asking who breaks first when prices rise. Meanwhile, many working households weren't cut off, but were quietly moved back in line. No announcement, no warning. That's not theater. That's triage. Speed mattered too. Seniors weren't just prioritized. They were fast verified. Their data already exists. Benefit amounts are consistent. Addresses rarely change. Income sources are simple. Treasury didn't need new applications or filings. Even seniors who don't file taxes weren't bottlenecked. The system was always capable of this efficiency. It just never chose to use it. This raised a big fear for many seniors. Would this affect Social Security? Would SSI or SSDI be reduced later? Treasury was clear. This payment is not income. It's not wages. It's classified as a tariff rebate. It doesn't affect COLA, benefit calculations, or trigger reviews. Holding large sums long-term can affect asset-based programs, but the payment itself doesn't claw back benefits or reopen files. That reassurance mattered as much as the money. This didn't look like a one-off. It looked like proof of concept. Treasury learned it can identify, verify, prioritize, and distribute without Congress slowing things down. Systems like that aren't built for one moment. They're tested to see if they work. Notice what this wasn't called. It wasn't emergency relief. It wasn't one-time stimulus. The language was neutral and boring on purpose. Politically, that sends a signal without promises. Administratively, it proves the machine runs. Once a mechanism exists, it doesn't disappear. For decades, relief followed one path: work, income, IRS redistribution. This didn't. The money came from imports, not labor. From foreign goods, not American paychecks. That's a subtle but major shift. Before income taxes dominated, tariffs funded much of the government. This wasn't about ending income tax. It was about direction. Money reached Americans without the IRS as gatekeeper, and people noticed. The silence around this was intentional. Loud rollouts move markets, invite panic, misinformation, and scams. Acting first and talking later reduces interference and fraud. Scammers thrive on noise and urgency. Treasury will never call, text, or ask for personal information. Any message demanding immediate action is a scam. Real processes are quiet, boring, and administrative. So let's land this clearly. What's confirmed is this: the structure is set, prioritization is locked, and execution is underway. What's not confirmed are guarantees of repeats or expansions. Anyone claiming certainty there is lying. This wasn't generosity. It wasn't a miracle. It was acknowledgement. Acknowledgement that inflation hit fixed incomes first, that old systems failed. That relief doesn't have to flow through broken machinery. It didn't solve everything. It didn't end inflation. But it proved the line can move. Once you understand what happened at 2 a.m., it's clear this wasn't the end of the story. It was the first step.